guys, welcome back to Wild and Purdy. We are jumping into week 2 right off the bat by getting right into the block. You should have received the instructions and we're just gonna get started. So you'll notice in front of me I have my 4 squares from Fabric F that are 3 7/8 inches square, and then I also have here my Fabric A 7 1/4 inch square. The first step is to take a fabric marking pen to mark your fabrics so we can make our flying geese 4 at a time. I like to use the Pilot friction pens. They mark on your fabric and then they erase with heat. So you just iron on it and it will erase the marks. Be forewarned that if you put your fabric in the freezer, the marks will come back. Cold temperatures will make the marks come back. I've never had this be a problem with any of the quilts that I make, so this is what I use. So the first step here, I'm just going to grab this ruler. We are going to take the right side of our 7 1/4 inch piece of fabric, and we are going to mark it on one of the diagonals. And I'm going to do this on the right side of the fabric for this piece only. So you'll notice now I have my line drawn. On the wrong side of your 4 squares, you are going to do the same. You're going to mark it diagonally. So let's just do that here. All right, now that we have everything marked together, we are going to take our piece that we marked on the diagonal, and we're going to take 2 that are also marked. It's kind of hard to see on mine, but I have the mark there, and I'm just going to line them up, 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. And I am going to go over to my sewing machine, and I am going to sew 1/4 inch to the right side of the line and 1/4 inch to the left side of the line. So essentially I'm going to sew on each side of the line that we just created. So we'll go do that and then we'll be right back. Okay, so now we are back at my cutting table here, and you'll notice that I have sewn 1/4 inch from each side of my line. So now I am going to go ahead and I am going to cut right down the diagonal line that I drew previously, which should be in the middle of your 2 seams. We're just going to cut. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to go and you're going to iron these seams open. Okay? I'm going to do that and I will be right back. Okay, now you will see that I have pressed both of mine to the dark side. And now I'm going to take one of the squares that I drew. It's very hard to see, but I drew a diagonal line across previously. I'm going to set that up in this orientation on top of the piece we just sewed. So basically you're going to have this upside down heart looking thing. You're going to take your dark fabric and you're going to put it to meet the top. And we're going to go do the same thing. We're going to sew 1/4 inch from this side and 1/4 inch from this side. And we are going to repeat that for both of our halves that we just created. So we'll go back to the sewing machine and do that now. Okay, we're back at my cutting table, and you should have something that looks like 2 pairs of these. I can get them both on screen here. What we're going to do now is the same thing. We're just going to cut right in between them where we drew our line. And you're going to be ended up with 2 flying geese per pair. Flying geese 1, which we'll go ahead and press open here shortly, and flying geese number 2. We will have to square these up, but it's really as simple as that to make flying geese. I think this is the best method that I've come across to do it. So I'm going to press. All right, our next step is going to be, once you've squared these all up, is going to be to sew your flying geese into sets of 2 together. So you're going to face them the same direction and you're going to sew along this seam. All right, guys, you'll notice now that we have 2 sets of flying geese pairs, which we're going to set aside because they're the start of our new blocks. So now we're going to go ahead and work on the other part of the blocks, which I have in front of us right now. These are the 2" by 19" strips. And if you're following along on the directions, I'm on page 3. And my color arrangement looks like this. Get it up here better for you. We're on step number 1 in this arrangement. This is my color F, this is E, this is D, and this is F. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to sew these strips together, and then we'll come back for the next step. And you will notice that I have all 4 of my colors sewn together. I have my fabric F, my fabric D, my fabric E, and my fabric F. What I'm going to do now, that these are sewn together and it measures 6.5 inches in this direction, I need to cut it to 9.5. This is a 19" piece, so 9.5 will be perfectly in the middle, and then we'll have 2 of them, which will get attached later to these 2 pieces. So let's go ahead and measure out 9.5 inches and make our cut. So we're at 9.5. We are going to cut. All right, so now I have 2 identical pieces here. And let's just double check that I have these in the right order. I have F, D, E, F, but I want F, E, D, F. This is where this quilt could get a little confusing for people. You just really want to make sure that you're using your visual reference guide of these are my fabrics, so that as you're reading the pattern, you can make sure that your fabrics stay in the correct order. Mine are especially confusing because the color values are super close to each other. So just take your time and make sure that you get them aligned properly. So now the next step is to take our flying geese pairs and basically sew them to the top. Get this on screen for you guys. Sew them to the top of these blocks. So we're going to sew right here on both of these pairs with the geese pointing away from the strips that we just sewed. So we'll do that, press them open, and be right back. Okay, now we can see that I have sewn here the flying geese pair to the strip set. Our next step is to take fabric D, and we're going to sew a piece on the top, screen top, a piece on the bottom on your screen, and then a piece on the end. We're going to do that with fabric D. Then we're going to come back and we're going to do that with fabric C, and then we're going to finish that with fabric B. And we're always going to do the long sides and then the short side. And we're going to repeat that with 3 different colors. All right, everybody, you can see here that I have taken our flying geese set with the original strip set, and I have sewn my long pieces on with my short edge a total of 3 times. So I have 3 loops or horseshoes that go around our original flying geese strip set. I have done that for both of mine, so I have a total of 2. And now I'm going to move on to the next step. So we're going to set these aside and move on to our 30" strips. If you're following along in the pattern, I am on step number 6 on page number 3. I'm going to take my 30" strip set. This is my color F, and I'm going to sew it to my color B, just this guy. And then I'm going to sew that to my color C, which is this guy. So I'm going to go F, B, C, and I'm going to sew these 3 together, and I'll be right back. All right, everybody, I am back here with my 30" strips with all 3 of my fabrics sewn together. And now we are going to basically cut this into 3 pieces. It's 30 inches long, so we are going to cut this into 3 pieces that are 10 inches long each. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. That's 1. And that is 2 and 3. So now what we are going to do here is we are going to take our piece here and with your C pieces facing out, can I zoom this out a bit? Yes, I can. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is with our C piece facing out, we are going to, F, your darkest color is gonna be facing your fabric. Basically, you're gonna measure 1 inch down from the bottom of your goose piece, and that is where you're gonna start sewing this piece. So essentially what I'm gonna do is take an imaginary line, which I will use here. I'm 1 inch down, line this up, and I'm gonna start sewing this right here. So I'm gonna move this over and I'm actually gonna go grab some of my sewing clips here. I'm just gonna clip this on. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So basically we're gonna line this all back up again. So we're gonna measure 1 inch down and then we're gonna come straight across, and our letter F fabric, our darkest, is gonna go closest to the edge. And we're going to pin. All right, let's go sew. So now we should have something that looks a little bit like this. I've sewn the 2 pieces, kind of these wing things, off to the side. Now I'm going to take our final piece, and again with the dark color facing it, I'm going to find the center of this piece. Make a little fold there just to find the center of it. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to find the center of this piece and I'm going to clip it, pin it, and sew it on top like so. When we're all finished, this is what it should look like. We have our 3 flaps on the 3 edges, and we have our nice center block. We're going to repeat this process to add the other wings, for lack of a better term, to the sides and the top here. And then we will move on to trimming this into a usable block for our quilt. All right, everybody, we are back. It is time to trim this baby, which is probably the most complicated part of this entire quilt. It's really not horribly difficult. I like to use a roll of just masking tape, whatever thickness. It doesn't have to be this thick. This is just what I have at home, to make reference lines for me so that I can check that everything's going to work out by the time that I cut it. So essentially what we are going to do is we are going to use this seam as our vertical reference line. And I'm going to line this vertical seam up with the 15-inch mark, which you cannot see on here. Let me move, yeah, just a smidge. Okay, with this 15-inch mark here, because it's a little bit bolder, I'm going to use that as my reference point. And I'm going to make sure that when I put the edge of my ruler up on this seam, I am on that 15-inch mark, and my block is pointing to the upper right, and I am on the 15-inch mark. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to use this seam as my horizontal mark, and I'm going to line that up and make sure that that lines up with the other bold line on my cutting mat. This cutting mat, it's 10. On yours, it might be something different depending on the size of your mat. So you just want to use the bold line kind of as your reference line. What this does is it makes sure that our quilt is in the square direction to begin with. Now what we're going to do is from the horizontal reference point, which is the one that we just looked at, this 10-inch mark, I am going to measure down 8 8/4 inches with my ruler here on my mat. So 8 1/4 puts me at the 18 1/4 inch mark. So I'm going to move this to the top edge of my blade, or the bottom edge, sorry, is at the 18 1/4 inch mark, which is just 8 1/4 down from my 10-inch reference point. So basically I'm taking my horizontal reference line, measuring down 8 1/4, and that's where I'm putting the bottom edge of my ruler. Then I'm going to take a piece of tape that I've already pre-cut, just to a big enough size to cover it all. And I'm going to line that up with that bottom edge all the way across. Ta-da! That is where I'm going to make my bottom cut. But I'm not going to cut yet. I'm going to see how this all looks, make sure it all works out correctly before I cut. So now we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to do it on the upper side. So we're going to look at our 10-inch reference line. I am going to measure up 8 1/4 from there, which puts me at the 2 1/4 inch mark, just based on where how my mat is laid out. It's kind of upside down, but that's okay. So we're going to put our ruler at the 2 1/4 inch mark all the way across. And then I'm going to put another piece of tape, which you guys are not really seeing here. I'm going to put another piece of tape all the way across the top right there. It's a little hard for me to see, so 2 1/4 all the way across, 2 1/4. So that is the horizontal reference marks. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to use our vertical marks. So I'm going to move you back here. My lens isn't quite big enough or far enough away here. This is my reference line. It is the 15-inch mark on my mat. So we are going to measure 8 1/4 over to the right side, which puts me at the 7 1/4 inch mark based on how my stuff is here. I gotta move down a bit. So 8 1/4 makes the 7 1/4 mark. So I'm gonna line this up with 7 1/4. I should say 6 3/4. And again, I'm gonna take a piece of tape. Oops, I'm stuck together here. Take a piece of tape here, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna use this to put it right up to where that ruler is. That gives me that piece. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go over the left. So from our bold line, I'm going to measure over 8 1/4, which puts me at 23 1/4, which is right here. And then I'm going to put my tape mark on the outside here. Quarter, 23, and I'm a little bit off here. So I'm going to take my tape, go over to the 23 1/4 inch mark here. Okay, so now you can see, let me move it back here, you can see that this is what the block is going to look like once we cut. So I'm going to go ahead and cut. You'll notice that I'm a little bit off here, but I am pretty sure I can, this is going to be okay in my quilts. It's not going to make that big of a deal. I can sew it in. If I really wanted to, I could rip this off and I could move it down a little bit to make it cover, because I've got plenty up there. But I'm kind of a lazy process sewer. I do it more for the process. I don't do it for the perfection. So I'm just going to roll with it. We're going to make it work. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to cut everywhere that my piece of tape tells me to. Same thing up here, which is hard for me to see. Okay, so now you lift your bad boy up and you got a quilt block. How cool is that? Now we're going to repeat the process and do the same thing on the other side for the other block. And you'll just pick all this stuff up off of your mat and start over. And you got these cute little pieces that you can use in future scrappy quilts or crumb quilts or whatever you would like to do with them. We will not be using these pieces that I am ripping off of the tape. So you are free to use them for whatever you would like.